Iowa City. Welcome on in. Today is Tuesday, February 6, 2024. We are here live from the Iowa Memorial Union here at the University of Iowa. My name is Sean P. and welcome on in to today's edition of Sean on Sports. As always, we've got a lot to get into, so let's get started with the 6 major headlines from this past week. Here we go. Number 1. For one single week, Caitlin Clark was not in the spotlight for women's college basketball, as this honor belongs to Juju Watkins, the freshman phenom from USC, against a then number 4 Stanford, led by the venerable Cameron Brink, who will probably go number 2 in this year's WNBA draft. Excuse me. Watkins tallied 51 points. 51 points. That is crazy. This is the packed Kelsey Plum's record-setting 57 points against Utah in 2017, and the most in a D1 game since Ayoka Lee back in January of 2022 put up 61 for Kansas State. The even crazier thing is that USC only beat Stanford 67-58. Meaning that with 51 points, Watkins scored 76% of USC's points. And she did this on over 50% true shooting, too, so she was efficient in her execution. For reference, all Iowa fans, Caitlin Clark's highest game is only 46. She is yet to break 50. All this to say, Juju Watkins is a bright up-and-coming star in the women's college basketball game. Excuse me. And I cannot wait to see what she will do in the future for USC. Coming in at number 2, we talked about this a little bit last week, but the new spring football merger league between the UFL, has announced its official schedule, with the first game taking place on March 30th in Arlington, Texas, between USFL champs Birmingham Stallions and the XFL champs Arlington Renegades. 4 games will take place every weekend starting on March 30th with 10 regular season games. Conference championships will be held June 8th through 9th, and then the UFL championship will be played on June 16th, but the site for that game has not been named yet. Needless to say, and I said this last week as well, I am really, really, really super excited for this league. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Pardon me, my goodness. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to bring a lot of good energy to the football scene, especially after, the football season's going to end next week, the NFL season. And we're going to be in that football void. We're going to be kind of in the dog days of not necessarily summer, but the dog days of the spring and, the early summer. So this will be good for football. I'm going to be really excited for it. And I know the fans are excited for it too. Like, again, I talked about this a lot last week, but the fans really want to see this. The fans are showing up and showing out for this, obviously much and in many numbers. But the XFL and the USFL and now the UFL, they're having teams in maybe some smaller markets or markets that don't necessarily have a great pro team. So it's giving a good second team to latch onto. And it's a good way to help get people into the game. I know, like, for the city of St. Louis, their team, the Battlehawks, I'm a big time Battlehawks fan. The city of St. Louis wants a football team. They want to see a football team, and they want to see a football team succeed. They broke the XFL attendance record 3 times last year with, I think it was like 37,000 plus packing into the Dome at America's Center there in St. Louis. So people want to see this. People will show up for this. And maybe, it'll be a good place if the UFL decides to expand. I know that they have a team in Salt Lake, and they have a team in Birmingham, they have a team in Memphis. If in this would be a good launching year to see if in a couple of years, maybe the NFL can take note about possibly furthering expansion teams in some of these other cities. Maybe not necessarily granting the franchise per se to the UFL team, but can put a franchise into these cities, because I know that the NFL is going to want to expand here soon. The NFL is bigger than ever, and I think probably the UFL is a good place to test out markets for that, while also giving us some really incredible football. At number 3, Joel Embiid of the Philadelphia 76ers is going to be missing an extended period of time as the center The MVP candidate tore his right meniscus in a game against the Warriors on January 30th. The team announced Sunday he will be undergoing surgery and that he will miss an extended period of time. However, they also said that the door might be open for his return later in the season. This is about the worst thing that could happen for the 76ers, yet at the same time, you could kind of see this coming. Like something was going to happen. They weren't necessarily doing great, but, they were cruising through the East. They were sitting at, fourth, fifth seed in the East. Embiid was putting up prime Wilt numbers. He was putting up some impressive numbers in his title defense. But yeah, I feel like you knew that something like this was going to happen. And sure enough, here it did. And I feel terrible for Embiid as well as he's dealt with, I think he tore his meniscus in his other knee. And I think he hasn't necessarily torn a meniscus in his right knee, but he has had issues in his right knee before. He's had surgery on both knees, both early in his career. And so this is just terrible for him because it's going to keep taking time away from him. And he is the centerpiece to the 76ers here. How does this team respond with him being out now for an extended period of time? That's my thing. And the thing I want to bring up too is if I'm the 76ers, the trade deadline is Thursday. The trade deadline is in 2 days. If you know that Embiid is going to be out for an extended period of time, do you potentially get go to the trade go to the excuse me go to the market and say we want to add some depth pieces to fill in for Embiid? Because I know that the 76ers have cap space. They do have cap space right now to do this. Can they go get depth in the trade market to fill some holes and maybe keep the ship afloat uh, until Embiid can get back if he comes back? I think that might be the play. In complete honesty, in the East, there's the way they're sitting right now. I think they're sitting at fourth or fifth. If they're sitting at fourth or fifth, they should be good. The East is not it's not as competitive as the West. It's definitely more of a bottom heavy conference, but they need to be able to sustain for just long enough until they can get themselves into the playoffs, and then they can reevaluate with Embiid. So that is, I think, what they should do is start looking for some possible quick depth pieces to fill some of the cap space, because you're not going to replace Embiid's production. He's averaging over 35 points per game, over 10 rebounds, over 5 blocks a game. He was, until his injury, on pace with like prime Wilt numbers. He was going to be the first player since Wilt to average over 35 with over 10 rebounds with over 5 blocks. He was going to put up another MVP season, and unfortunately, I think that with his injury, you may or may not have just given the MVP to Jokic, because I know that the NBA now has the games played rules for the MVPs and all of that, and so I don't remember how injuries are supposed to factor into that, but I mean, with the way that Jokic has been playing and has basically been keeping neck and neck with Embiid, Embiid's injury now, I think, just gives the MVP to Jokic. I think it does. He's going to win his third in 4 years, should have been fourth in 4 years, in my opinion. But I feel terrible for the 76ers, and I feel terrible for Embiid because his career should not be going like this. And the 76ers, I'm sorry, but you're still not going anywhere. It's unfortunate. At number 4, the stadium that will host the 2026 World Cup final has been announced, and that stadium is MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. And you know what? I'm really not quite sure how I feel about this, because I think that if the World Cup would have happened in the US like 10, 15 years ago, I would have said, yeah, sure, you put it in MetLife, that's a good idea. But now that we have SoFi, and I mean Jerry World has been around for the last 15 years, but now that we have AT&T in Arlington, and I think AT&T is going to host the opening game, but a part of me is just I'm a little confused as to why MetLife was chosen. I get that New York is, it's the media capital, it's the people capital, it's like the culture capital. You'll get the market is big there, but I personally, I would have put it in SoFi or I would have put it in AT&T Stadium because if you're going to host a World Cup, you want to put it at your best. And MetLife Stadium has terrible turf and it's open air and it's kind of on its way out where I think that SoFi or AT&T would be better because they're bigger, more modern, they can hold more capacity. They're in I don't want to call it more attractive markets, but they're in more of like up and coming markets, and I think it's a good way to bring people to there. And also I it's kind of far away from your Canadian and Mexican counterparts when it comes to hosting because you want to get the World Cup in 2026 is going to be hosted by Canada, the United States, and Mexico. It's like the North American joint bid or something like that. And I would put something a lot more central or a lot more closer so that you can get all three markets of fans there, but make it easier for international fans to travel to some of these places and to get in and get around to some of these places. So I'm not upset about it. I just think that that's kind of a curious choice to have the final. But I also think a part of it is that a lot of the U.S.'s men's national team players they are from the East Coast area. They're more East Coast. And so I think that also gives a lot to their fan bases and the kids there. So we will see, but that's just something I wanted to highlight. I think it's an interesting choice. At number 5, Cliff Kingsbury is making his return to the NFL world after taking a season off, this time as the new offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. With Dan Quinn in at head coach, former offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy was kicked to the curb after Washington boasted a horrible offense this year and he couldn't unlock Sam Howell. And so in comes Kingsbury. Kingsbury, he had originally accepted the same position at the Raiders, only to pull out and go for the Commanders in less than 24 hours. I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't know if the Raiders have hired an offensive coordinator yet. I don't think that they have. But we will see what he does here, and no one really needs reminding of how disastrous Kingsbury's time at Arizona was. That was Cliff Kingsbury. He started out really hot and then could not finish the job. Would go for like 8 straight wins and then immediately lose like 5 or 6 of his next 10, and then that would be it for him. And he did well with Kyler. I'm not going to say he did terrible with Kyler. He did well with Kyler, but he mismanaged a lot of other things. And maybe if he's back in an offensive coordinator role, maybe that will help him take some responsibility off him. And he also jumped straight from college to a head coaching job in the NFL. He did not get any sort of transition period. He went straight from Texas Tech to Arizona. At Texas Tech, of course, he was famous for coaching Patrick Mahomes, coaching the air raid offense, straight into Arizona, where I think he was probably a little bit in over his head as well. So we're going to see what he does, but I think the key thing here is what quarterback is Washington going to draft? Can he work with whatever quarterback Washington drafts? Because I think it's safe to say that Caleb Williams is off the table, but do you draft a guy like Drake May? Do you see if you can try and trade up to get someone like Jaden Daniels? Or do you maybe go for kind of the long shot pick, go with the experience, and see if you can get something out of Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, who both are like 24, 5, something like that? Do you have a college quarterback, but maybe who has a little bit of experience? So it'll be interesting to see where the Commanders go with this. And the hiring of Kingsbury, if they're going to hire someone like Kingsbury, they have to get a quarterback who is going to fit that system, who is going to fit this air raid system. Because Dan Quinn, he's a defense guy, so this is going to fall pretty much on Cliff Kingsbury. So we will see what happens there. We will see what happens there. But I don't know if I like the move. I'm not going to say it's a bad move, but we will see. It'll be interesting to see who the Raiders chooses their offensive coordinator because I thought for sure that they had Kingsbury in the bag. Anyway, number 6, finally, the NHL All-Star Weekend was this weekend, so that is what we're going to be talking about today. I promised everyone we will have the hockey-centric episode. I've been saying this since I've been on the air, but we were going to have the hockey episode. And so the hockey show, the hockey live, we're going to do it right now. We're going to talk about the NHL All-Star Weekend and all of the fun that comes with that. And we will be back right after this. All right, we are back. Time for the main story. Like I said, it is the hockey show. I said we're gonna do it. It's just past the NHL All-Star Weekend, so this is the perfect time to do it. I'm going to preface this now by saying that I am a very base, casual hockey fan. I somewhat keep up with the storylines, but I don't really know much like with the players and in depth on the teams or the histories of kind of stuff. I'm a St. Louis Blues fan. I actually, you know what? I made a terrible mistake. I wore my St. Louis Blues shirt yesterday, and even though you can't see it, I should have worn my Blues shirt today. That was a bad idea. I'm wearing a soccer shirt instead today. But I'm a very casual, I'm a very base fan. Like I will watch playoff hockey when it's on. Not necessarily the biggest fan of watching regular season hockey on TV, but I do love watching hockey games in person. Hockey is probably my most favorite sport to watch in person. So we're gonna have fun with this, but I'm gonna break down a little bit of what's been going on in the NHL All-Star Weekend this weekend. So here we go. The weekend was this past weekend, and it took place in Toronto with a lot of fanfare and a lot of positivity, which was really good. I think in the past, unless you were a diehard hockey fan, you haven't heard a lot about, or you don't really care very much about the NHL All-Star Game. It doesn't really take a lot of headlines. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It's kind of a footnote. But I think, especially even as a non-hockey, like a non-diehard hockey fan of myself, I really found that people were talking a lot more about the NHL All-Star Game this time around, and that it seemed really positive. Like this was a really good All-Star Game, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that went down in it. So the All Stars were divided into four teams, each with two captains and then an honorary Canadian celebrity co captain as well. So we have Team Matthews, the Toronto faithful, headed by Austin Matthews, Morgan Riley, and Justin Bieber. We have Team McDavid, which was helmed by this generation's GOAT, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Will Arnett. We have Team McKinnon, which was led by Nathan McKinnon, who I think he just set a new franchise record for the Colorado Avalanche in points. Cale Makar, and then Tate McRae. And then Team Hughes, which was captained by Quinn Hughes, Jack Hughes, and Michael Bublé. I thought that was an interesting one, but I'm gonna say I like that. And speaking of Mr. Bublé, I just want to point this out. I love Michael Bublé. He admitted in a press interview during the weekend, during the festivities, that he was high on shrooms during the All-Star draft, and that he didn't realize he was at the NHL All-Star draft, picking his team. Instead, he thought he was in Blades of Glory, which I thought was absolutely hilarious because you don't see or hear a lot of what Michael Bublé does outside of having the most beautiful voice ever. But the fact that he was on shrooms, and he said it was by accident. He only meant to take a little and accidentally took a bunch. But the fact that he was on shrooms for the NHL All-Star Draft, I think is just a super funny thing because Michael Bublé on shrooms, I'm sure would be an absolute trip. Um, but if you want, go look that up on YouTube. Him and Will Arnett are sitting there at a press conference, and Will Arnett's kind of like, "Dude, what are you doing? How did this happen?" So I thought that was really funny and something that happened. Connor McDavid, he continued to show why he is the best hockey player on the planet, as he won 4 of 8 skills competitions, taking the prize and the $1 million bag. He won fastest skater, stick handling, accuracy shooting, and the obstacle course of the 8 challenges there, representing the Edmonton Oilers very well. And yeah, this kid, I guess he's not a kid anymore, but I mean, this guy, he is the guy for our generation. I don't think we've quite had someone like him. I know we had Sidney Crosby kind of after Wayne Gretzky, but like this dude, he is the real deal. He is the real deal. He is crazy, and hopefully Edmonton can get a team around him so he can bring a Stanley Cup back to Canada because he is way too good to be doing what he's been doing and for Edmonton to not win. So that's a good place for him to show out in front of all of the NHL and NHL fans and on national TV because a lot of people need to watch Connor McDavid. He is crazy. I want to also point out that the uniforms this weekend were fantastic. I all-star uniforms for any sport are always hit or miss because the NBA has some really iconic ones and then they got some duds. MLB has some really great ones and then they have some absolutely terrible ones. Football in the Pro Bowl is a little less because you kind of have a little bit less to work with there, so you don't have a lot of room per se. But as far as jerseys go, I personally think that hockey jerseys, outside of a good soccer jersey, hockey jerseys are the best jerseys in all of sports. And these jerseys for the All Star game did not disappoint. The red, white, blue, and gold renditions of the All Star jersey all of them were good. Not one was bad. The gold was kind of weird seeing a gold on gold, but it worked. It worked. And I don't know if, I don't know what other people might have thought, excuse me, about these jerseys per se, or where they rank in the pantheon of NHL All-Star jerseys. But just from a subjective standpoint, from a non-hockey fan in myself, I thought that those were some super nice jerseys, and I honestly would get one because, yeah, I think hockey jerseys are fantastic. Wayne Gretzky, the great one, he also made an appearance behind the bench for Team Hughes this weekend. He is a friend of the former assistant coach who was coaching Team Hughes. There, he had previously coached with him. I forget the coach guy's name, but it was nice to see Gretzky behind the bench. It was nice to see him be there for the All-Star festivities. I think that really made a lot of people happy, and again, I think it's a good way to help promote the NHL by having the great one right there. And fun fact, my dad went to go see Gretzky play when he played in St. Louis, and he has a putt from that game. I'm pretty sure Gretzky scored a goal in that one. Again, another note here, Connor Bedard, the number one pick in the 2023 NHL draft, was also present at the game as an All-Star, but he did not play due to a broken jaw. And at 18, Bedard is doing jaw-dropping things, no offense to his injury, in Chicago. He currently has 15 goals and 18 assists in 39 games. This kid is 18. This kid is the same age that I am, and he is performing at an all-star level with the best that the National Hockey League has to offer. It is incredible to see the future of the game like this. You are 18 years old. You are putting up I think he's on some kind of rookie record for points, but you are putting up these incredible numbers to be named an all-star in your first year when you're 18. The sky is the limit for this kid. And it will be really interesting to see where he goes in the future and how his career pans out. But the jaw injury aside, if he continues to score in this way and he continues to assist in this game, and I know in hockey, you rack up points, which is a combination of your assists and your goals, and that kind of goes into your tally. But you gotta watch out, Gretzky. You gotta watch out some of these other guys because this kid could easily, barring major injuries, huge wears and tears. This kid could have 20 years to wreck this league. And so hopefully Chicago can build around him and kind of bring some of the glory back to Chicago because I know that they've been in some pretty dark times as of late. But this kid at 18 years old, that is absolutely incredible. Good for him. Great to see him there. Hopefully he gets back from injury okay. At Another thing that I think was a really great thing about this weekend was that the Professional Women's Hockey League, which started last year, made history this weekend as they performed a 3-on-3 exhibition in front of 16,392 fans, putting on a show with 8 goals between the two teams. This is an incredible event for the future of women's hockey and gender equality in sports, and it's a great promotion as well for the up-and-coming league, which is something that is really desperately needed. And to be able to do this on a national stage, this is how you get investors. This is how you get, this is how you get money put into this. Because I know for years they've been trying to start a professional women's hockey league in the same vein as the NHL. And will they ever be as big as the NHL? Unfortunately, they won't be. But this is good for the game, and this promotion needs to happen, and it needs to continue happening, and we need to continue to put eyes on women's sports and to continue to promote gender equality in women's sports. That that was a really good move by whoever organized that and whoever did that. And 16,392 fans. That is no joke. That is a real amount of fans who were there to see that game and who were there to cheer on that game and who were backing that game. So I hope that people from there can invest in that and can work with that in the future because that is something really cool to see. And so I hope we get more of that in the future. And I hope that the PWHL can continue to grow as a league as they get out of this first season, and then they can hopefully build for the next season and on down 5 years to come, so that they can become established. Because this is something I would really like to see happen. Um, and then finally, we have the hometown team, Team Matthews, which was he led his Toronto faithful to a victory over Team McDavid, 7-4, thus proving that Justin Bieber is the greater Canadian celebrity over Will Arnett. And honestly, that was a rousing success of an All Star weekend. There were a couple other things that happened, but again, like I said earlier, the news around this game has been overwhelmingly positive. It has been overwhelmingly positive. It has been really good to see this, and it's been really good that hopefully again more people can get into hockey and that hockey can expand its greater markets. And a bigger talking point of this, and they made a point to ask some of the all-stars who were there about this, was what do you think about NHL expansion? What do you think about possibly getting more teams in the United States, maybe putting a couple more in Canada? And the biggest one that was talked about that I saw was Salt Lake City. A lot of the All Stars who were there were in favor of, and they want to see an NHL team in Salt Lake City. And I think they have something right there, that the West, even though it's kind of an odd hockey market, I think if marketed correctly, you could see a really big fan base grow up around this, and a really good revenue stream grow up around this. But you kind of have to get the placement just right, because I mean, as we've seen, the hockey game in the Western United States and the Southwestern United States it's both good and bad. You're not quite sure what you're going to get, because on one hand you have the Vegas Golden Knights, who are arguably the greatest and most successful expansion team in any North American sports, making a Stanley Cup in their very first year, and then just winning the cup this past year within their first 5 years of existing. And again, huge fan base there. They also, by the way, Sin City has a big fan in the Pope. The Pope is a big hockey guy, and he likes the Vegas Golden Knights, which I think is hilarious that Sin City's hockey team is endorsed by the Pope. But they have a big fan base there, and they've got the money and they've got the hardware, and they're the champs now. But on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the Arizona Coyotes, who are just a mess. They can't get a stadium deal. They're on the bottom end of performing teams, and they're having to play in, I think, the Arizona State. I think they're having to play in Arizona State's hockey rink, since they can't get a new stadium deal done. So that is just, and no one's marketing it, and no one likes it. And so that is what you really have to balance there, is how exactly do we get hockey in the southwestern United States and in warmer temperatures too, because I know the NHL also wants to look to expand to some teams in Texas, which again, that would be a huge market to go into. So I think that the success of this All-Star weekend is a great jumping off point to say for maybe Gary Bettman, like, hey, we could take this hype and we can move it somewhere else. And I think that there are a lot of people that are hungry for hockey, and it is an up and coming sport in the US. So it will be fun to see. All in all, though, really, really great weekend from what I saw and from what I read about. It was really solid. We had a lot of fun time. The NHL season is continuing to resume, and we're going to talk about the standings when we come back right after this, because things are getting pretty tight in the standings. But we'll be right back. So let's talk just a little bit about the NHL standings here. Hold on, I gotta get this pulled up. So right now in the East, in the Atlantic Division in the East. Boston Bruins. They're still the guys in the East. They've got 71 points right now. They got 31 wins, 9 losses, 9 overtime losses. Got a goal differential of 45. They're 7-1 and 2 in their last 10. And despite some key pieces retiring and still leaving, Boston's still the guys to beat in the East. I don't think they're on their pace from last season, their greatest of all or greatest regular season of all time pace. I will have to ask one of my friends about that, who is a Bruins fan, and see what we got on there. So I might have to get back to that. But they're still the guys in the East. They're the big bad boys. But a thing that surprised me is the Panthers. The Panthers are at second place in the East overall record wise and or not record wise, excuse me, points wise. They're second in the Atlantic Division and second in the Eastern Conference. I'm surprised that the Panthers have put up this good of a season thus far because last year, of course, they had their magical Cinderella run to the cup where they couldn't quite get it done. And I kind of thought, you know what, that's cool, but they're probably just gonna fade back and fall back because hockey is taxing. Hockey is probably the most taxing sport, and when you're like the Panthers having to go through the absolute gauntlet of the Eastern Conference and then go into a Stanley Cup final. They just ran out of energy, and I didn't see how they were going to have energy carrying on into the next season, especially with a tighter Eastern Conference and a tighter Atlantic Division that they play in. But they are at second place right now, and I think that they will be someone to watch. I think they will be another possible dark horse to watch because I don't think Florida has put itself into the echelon yet of being like a total East contender. I think they're still in that like underdog status right there. So it'll be fun to see them, and they're kind of my second favorite. Like, you know what, if the Blues already aren't working out, but it's like I'd like to see the Panthers go back. They were a really fun team last year. And then for the rest of the East, you got the Lightning, or not, excuse me, in the rest of the Atlantic, you got the Lightning. That's not really much of a surprise. You got the Maple Leafs, though, who are sitting at 58 points right now, and they've got the same goal differential as the Red Wings, but the Red Wings do have 2 games in hand here. The Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews is having an incredible season and they're kind of wasting it. I'm not gonna lie. They should have a better record than this with what Austin Matthews is producing. And again, not a big hockey guy. I haven't seen it, so maybe it's a defense problem. Maybe it's a goaltending problem. Maybe everyone else on there is just terrible. But I think that Toronto really needs to step it up if they want to be serious in the postseason. But I mean, they're Toronto in the postseason, so that's not going to go anywhere. But they need to at least put on a show for it. Like, come on. And then shout out to one of my friends who's in Montreal for the Canadiens, the Habs. They're currently sitting at 48 points from 49 games played, 20 wins, 21 losses, 8 overtime losses, and a whopping negative 39 goal differential. Yikes. Over in the Metropolitan Division of the Eastern Conference, the New York Rangers, we all knew this. The New York Rangers, they were going to be good and they were going to be coming up this season. They're sitting at 65 points right now. I think that they will be a good team in the playoffs. I have seen a little bit of Rangers hockey. I have seen some of the following around it. So I think that they will be, I don't think that they will be like quite the force to be reckoned with, but they'll be a good one. And then the Hurricanes and the Flyers and the Islanders, they're all kind of sitting middling in the Metropolitan Division. But I don't really think they're going to get anywhere because the East is definitely bottom heavy again this year. Same in the NBA, definitely bottom heavy. You've got your 3 or 4 who are really coming out over the top, and then everyone else is kind of sitting at mid to bad. No one is terrible, but no one's making any noise either. Then moving over to the Western Conference. The Western Conference, at least in the Central Division, is a lot tighter right now. So the Avalanche are currently leading, as I think a lot of people predicted. They're sitting at 68 points right now. They have a goal differential of 36. They're 32 wins, 14 losses, 4 overtime losses. Although they did just lose their most previous game, but I think these are the second place guys. I think this is probably who a lot of people are picking to come out of the West for the Stanley Cup, and I think probably the safer choice. They're the strongest choice. They have the championship pedigree. They have the experience. They have a really good lineup with McKinnon and Kale McCarr, especially with everyone healthy. So it'll be fun to see kind of where they go. But I think that they will probably win out the Central Division, barring some kind of massive collapse. Right behind them, though, only 2 points behind is the Dallas Stars, and I feel like, again, not a big hockey guy, but I know from years past we haven't heard from the Stars in a little bit, so it's cool that it's cool that they're maybe possibly back on the up and come up. They will get a playoff spot if they continue this. They have roughly a similar goal differential to the Avalanche. They've got 30 wins, so they're in a good spot right now. They are on a 3-game winning streak as well. So who knows if the Avalanche are slipping? Maybe the Stars can catch up to them. I don't see that, but I think that that's something that could happen. And then Winnipeg Jets, good for Winnipeg. They're only a singular point behind the Stars. They have 65 points. They also have 30 wins, 12 losses, 5 overtime losses. They have a better goal differential at 39. However, and this is a big however, they have lost their last three. And that's a big one, especially with only 3 points separating the Jets from the top. You really have got to clean up these points, especially in the midseason now, so that you can get ready for the final push at the end. So I'll be watching the Jets over in the Central Division. I think that that would be a fun kind of sleeper pick, and I don't know how much success the Jets have had as a franchise, but hopefully they can do better than their New York counterparts. And then you got the Blues. They're sitting at fourth. They got 54 points. They're not going to do anything. Maybe they sneak into a playoff spot. They have a terrible goal differential. It's at negative 12. But it could be worse because you could be the Blackhawks, who right now only have 14 wins, 34 losses, only at 30 points. They've lost their last four. Connor Bedard, of course, has been injured. And they have a goal differential of negative 72. That is horrible, yet somehow not the worst, because as we move into the Pacific Division with a team that has arguably the same record, the Sharks, the San Jose Sharks, have a goal differential of negative 92. And I don't know in hockey, like what on bad teams, like what a bad goal differential looks like, but like holy moly, you're halfway through the season and you've almost got 100 more goals scored on you than you have scored. That is, oh, that is rough. That is really rough, especially for San Jose. It's been kind of a terrible fall for them, as 4 or 5 years ago they were in the conference finals against the Blues, and it's all kind of gone downhill from there, which is a shame because I think that playing in the Bay Area, playing there in San Jose, that would be a really good market for them, and that's a good sports market, especially with the success of the Warriors and the 49ers. And I've been to the SAP Center where they have played. It's a nice place, but they can't put a nice team in that nice place, unfortunately. So then going back to the standings at the top, you've got the Pacific Division. You've got the Canucks. We talked about the Canucks last week. I actually saw a guy wearing a Canucks jersey out on the Pennant yesterday. That was pretty cool. The Canucks have tied for the best record in the NHL right now, and they do have a better goal differential, so I guess you could technically say that they are the best team in the NHL right now. They've continued their success from last week when I talked about, can they maintain their success, and we'll continue to watch this again, like I said in last week's show. We'll continue to watch this. We'll continue to see this, but I like this. These guys, again, they're no strangers to postseason success. They do have two President's trophies. They have appeared in a couple Stanley Cups. They have not won. But I like seeing these guys win. I think this is kind of an out of nowhere, well, not maybe not an out of nowhere, I want to say, but like not a team that you'd expect. Maybe not as drastic as Florida making it to the Stanley Cup last year, but definitely not one that you'd think first, because when it comes to, hockey in the Western Conference, you probably think of the Avalanche and the Golden Knights and the Oilers, but to see Vancouver winning like this is really fun. I like this. They have a good goal differential of 59. They're 8-0-2 in their last 10 games. So I think go Canucks out of the West, especially if the Blues can't make it. If Florida doesn't make it, and if Winnipeg falls off, then I think then we get on the Canucks bandwagon. I would like to see the Canucks go far. Right behind them, seven, well, I guess not right behind them, it's about 7 points, but 7 points behind them is the Vegas Golden Knights. The defending champs, they're putting up kind of a respectable title defense campaign. I think to this point they will make the playoffs again, and anything can happen in the playoffs. But I think it's a good testament to really how difficult professional hockey is on a season by season basis, a game in, game out basis, is that unlike with, maybe football or basketball, when you go on these long, long playoff runs, and hockey playoffs are 3 series that are 7 games, or could go to 7 games, and then the Stanley Cup Finals. All of this, happens as it goes into June, and then the hockey season starts back up again in September, October, something like that. The Golden Knights had to go through a gauntlet, and they're tired. And hockey again is a sport where you play with a lot of injuries, you play with a lot of bumps and bruises, and so it does not surprise me that they are maybe not necessarily having the greatest or the most impressive title defense ever, just because it's a grind, it's a struggle, and you just kind of have to get to the playoffs, and then you can reassess from there. And I think a lot of NBA teams do this. Well, I'm not going to argue the physical taxation of hockey and the NBA, but even though, in my opinion, hockey is a lot more physically taxing season by season, you see this a lot in the NBA where a lot of the playoff teams who know that they will be playoff teams mostly just kind of they cruise through the regular season. They don't really do too much, but then when they hit the playoffs, they kind of just they flip the switch and then they're on. And so, excuse me. And so maybe I think that's what the Golden Knights are doing is they're just kind of coasting. They're hopefully gathering some strength here and then getting ready to go into the playoffs. So I haven't heard too many big stories about them, like, oh, they've looked so good and that they'll repeat, but they'll be back. We'll see them again. Behind them by another 5 points, this is in the Pacific Division of the Western Conference, is the Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers, this has been impressive. This has truly been impressive what they have done because, like I said, Connor McDavid is the guy of our generation. He is the best player right now, and he needs a team that can satisfy him as the best player. And right now, the best player has been leading his team. The Oilers are sitting at 59 points. 16 games ago, they were 13, 15, and 1. And they were sitting, I think they were sitting at I want to say they were sitting at 25 points, something like that. Since that date, I don't know what date it was or what game it was, they have won 16 in a row. They are now 14 games above 500, or at least wins and losses. They have one overtime loss in the season, but they have won 16 in a row. They are blazing. They still have a lot of points ground to make up. I don't know if they will fully make it up, but wow, that is shocking. That is pretty good. So, like I said earlier, especially with McDavid winning the skills competition in the All-Star weekend, that's putting some hype into Edmonton. That's really putting some hype into Edmonton. And I know I would love to see a Canadian team go far in the playoffs and bring a Stanley Cup back to Canada. After that, it's a lot of just middling in the Western Conference. You got the Kings sitting at 56 points, Seattle sitting at 52 points, which is a shame because they were doing so well at the beginning of the year. The Flames at 49 points, the Ducks at 38, and the Sharks at 33. So it's nothing too crazy, nothing too special, but those are the guys to watch right now. And so that was the hockey show. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not the biggest hockey guy. I'm not the biggest aficionado, but I just tried to do my best to report and talk on it. I had a lot of fun with it, and I know that especially come playoff time, we will be watching and seeing a lot more hockey. We will be right back. Right, we're back. Sorry, I cut a little fast there. I lost a little track of time. Finally, we didn't do this last week, but this is, of course, a staple of the show for those listening in for the first time in this semester. As the As the acronym for my show is SOS, Sean on Sports, we want to talk about the six teams sending an SOS, the six teams in distress. So here we go. At number one, as always, as they've been pretty much since I've been doing this show, the Detroit Pistons. Detroit, guys, deadline is Thursday. You're on the chopping block. What do you do? What do you give? Who do you owe? And how are you going to fix this mess? Is Bojan gone? Do you trade Killian Hayes? Do you, as stupid as this sounds, but everyone's been talking about that, like, do you trade for Zach LaVine? It's not happening, but still, there is so many frustrating questions around this franchise, yet only 6 wins. And so I think now is the time that you make the move for your future to say, all right, are we blowing this up or are we going to try and get pieces to maybe salvage this season, at least for the moment, try and get us over the double digit win mark? And then do we, sell them off and try and get assets later? This is a tricky one because I don't know what the right solution is because I feel like if you trade pieces like Killian Hayes, who has been terrible, I mean, he has not been putting up stuff, but he is a high draft pick of yours, and he's someone that you do put out on the floor every single night. Do you trade him? What do you get for him in return? Because his production has not been good. Do you get picks? Do you get cash considerations? Like what player would you trade for Hayes, who's I think in the bottom of the league in like shooting efficiency and like points per game? Like what do you get for him? And then do you trade Boyan? Do you trade Boyan Bogdanovic? Because he had outside of Cade Cunningham, he has arguably been your best player. And I think they brought him in this past offseason, or he's been a recent addition, but he has been a producer. He's been mostly consistent for this team. And with, Cade being in and out with a couple injuries here and there and not really anyone else wanting to step up big time per se, and Boyan has that veteran leadership and that presence. Do you trade him? Do you trade him and try to salvage maybe a draft pick or two out of him, maybe a replacement level player or a couple below replacement level players? And then all this stuff about Zach LaVine, it's like, guys, stop. The Pistons are not in any position to make any demands when it comes to anyone of remotely high level, like barely even average level. So they are just in a massive pickle right now. I will be curious to see and know what they do come deadline day, or they could do nothing. They could still do nothing. But as the way it stands right now, I really don't think that they're going to get to double digit wins. I think they're probably going to get, I want to say like 2 to 3 more, but I don't think they're going to get to double digit wins. They'll probably have like 9, but man, it's terrible to see. Speaking of terrible basketball to see, so for those of you who don't know this, I'm a Missouri Tigers fan. I'm from Columbia, from down there, but I want to talk objectively. My Missouri bias aside, I just want to talk objectively about the Missouri men's basketball team right now because they are in a load of trouble. So last year, for those who don't know, Mizzou had been, they'd been a middling to terrible program. They brought in a new head coach, Dennis Gates from Cleveland State, and also from who had coached at Florida State, had coached at Cleveland State. They brought him in. We weren't really sure what was going to happen with Gates. What's he bringing in? We got a lot of these veteran transfers, but we also got some new guys. And last year was like a perfect blend. Everything that could go right last year went right last year for Mizzou's men's basketball program. 20 plus win season. Finished tied for third in the SEC conference record wise. NCAA tournament win, first tournament win in 13 years. Gates orchestrated this massive turnaround. This was huge. There was a lot of hype coming into this next season. Now, Mizzou was not expected to be a top 25 team. I didn't even expect them to be a top 25 team. There are teams way better than us. I think we were projected in like the high 30s, low to mid 40s, which is fine. You know what? That's good, but we can sneakily maybe win 20 games, get ourselves back in at like at a 7 seed, maybe 7, 8 seed, something like that. Um, and we knew that we had a lot of people departing, a lot of veteran guys who went and played in the NBA. Kobe Brown is with the Los Angeles Clippers right now. He was a big time player for Mizzou. Demoy Hodge was a fifth year transfer student. He's with the Lakers now. Had a couple others go get drafted. So then that left us stuck with some weird bench transfer guys and some young guys, and Gates's big recruiting classes aren't coming in until next year. So we didn't think that we were going to be probably as great as we were last year. But this team is rough. It's really rough. They came out of conference play with only 8 wins, which was shaky but not bad, including a 10-point loss to Kansas at Kansas. We almost had Kansas in that game. But then it all fell apart come conference. Mizzou is 0-9 in conference play, going from 8-5 to 8-14, including giving Vanderbilt their first win in conference because Vanderbilt was 0-7 to that point, and it was just a really messy situation as the SEC is getting tougher. It's been getting tougher in this decade. We've seen the rise of SEC basketball. And the thing is Mizzou cannot close out games. They are coming within about 8 points or less in all of their conference games, and their biggest margin was only 15. So you're in these games, but you cannot close them out, and that's just frustrating. And it's going to be interesting to see if we can go from a 20 plus win season in 1 year under Gates to winless in conference the next year. That would be something. I have full faith in Gates, but that is just it's been terrible to watch, even from an objective standpoint. It is terrible to watch. At number 3, we've got anybody who's occupying the number 2 spot in women's college basketball this season. All year, it's been a revolving door at number 2, with South Carolina just continuing to sit at number 1. Kansas State has lost it. Stanford has lost it. North Carolina State has lost it. Iowa has lost it. Colorado has lost it. In a year full of upsets in women's college basketball, no one is safe at number 2. So here's hoping that South Carolina can lose a game or two. Incidentally, I think they play Missouri tonight, and Missouri women are 11-11, so that's probably not going to go very well. But they can lose a game or two so that Iowa can take its rightful place at number 1, because I think Caitlin Clark deserves to be number 1 for once, and that would be really cool to go see her and the number 1 women's team. And number 4, Inter Miami FC. We're going to talk Inter Miami. It's the team of Messi. It's been making its grand preseason tour around the world. It's been matching up against some of the higher key games against some notable opponents. However, and I know that this is a preseason exhibition, and it's, Messi and the gang have been in and out of playing. Inter Miami has taken some actually embarrassing losses, including I think it was 6-0 or 6-1 at the hands of Al Nasser, which is Cristiano Ronaldo's Saudi Arabian side. And Ronaldo didn't even play in this game. And I say this because if Inter Miami wants to build a winning brand around Messi and bring more awareness to the MLS, you cannot be embarrassingly losing exhibition games like this. You cannot just market this around Messi alone, even though you could. But you have to have a winning team around it, and you have to show to Messi that you are willing to win and you are willing to put money behind him to build this, because sure, everyone will buy the tickets to go see Messi, but wouldn't it be even better if you could have a team that could go into the playoffs, that can go further into cup finals, that can go into the CONCACAF Nations League, which is like a North American, Central American, club soccer tournament, for those who don't know. You want to sell more games, so you need to get a winning team around him, and it's just been embarrassing to watch this, and I know Messi has been upset with this too. So just something to think about as the MLS season. We'll start to see that come up again around April and May. But yeesh, it's not been good. So I hope that Inter Miami gets their act together, because I know we all want to see Messi win a trophy in America. That would be really huge for him. At number 5, I would say the Los Angeles Lakers, because there's been all this weird trade rumors that LeBron's going to get traded. He won't get traded. But the Lakers are in the same place that they were last year. They are completely mid. They are completely stagnant. They can't do anything. And they're just sitting there. I think they have a 500 record right now. So what do you do if you're the Lakers? Because last year you already overhauled all the roster and you did make that playoff run. But now, do you do the same thing again? Do you fire Coach Darvin Ham? Because LeBron's not going anywhere and AD's not going anywhere, but do you get rid of guys like D'Angelo Russell? Do you trade for Dennis Schroeder again? Like, ever since 2020, ever since they had that Mickey Mouse ring in the bubble, it has been nothing but mid from the Lakers. And if they decide to trade off their stuff and they don't get another deep playoff run here, what do you do? Because I know that the Lakers are right now, I think they're out of future firsts or something like that. So they can't take or tap good guys in the draft. So they're stuck with what they've got. And so that'll be something to see, but they gotta, especially in the West too, with how tight it is, they really have to win this, or not win this, but they have to. If they're going to make a trade, they got to make the right trade. They got to make the trade for depth, and then they got to have LeBron and AD just get to that new level because it's not working right now. It just straight up, it's not working, and they're going to continue to dwindle, and they maybe might find themselves in a play-in spot, but who knows? It's been rough to see, but yeah, there's no way LeBron's getting traded at the deadline. So just those rumors. Throw them out. It's not happening. And then finally, this is not a team in distress per se, but last night we had absolutely incredible Kansas versus Kansas State rivalry in which Kansas State at home beat Kansas 75-70 in OT, dropping Kansas to 18-5 actually, and 6-4 in conference play, which as a Mizzou fan, it's nice to watch Kansas lose, but I think just as a basketball fan in general, it's nice to watch Kansas lose. And that's the curious thing to me too, is we'll see how Kansas does in the Big 12, because the Big 12, like the SEC, has been getting stronger. Do I think that there's anyone capable of, toe to toe beating up on Kansas? Not really, but that's four conference losses. That's big. That's really big, and that'll affect their seeding in the conference tournament too. And I think Kansas definitely needs to put on a strong showing to show that they're continuing to be number one seed. These guys are the team to beat. So it was nice to see Kansas lose. It was nice to see Kansas State win too. Kansas State is a very good team. They're a sleeper team for me. I think they're 15-8, 15-7, and their record doesn't quite show that, but they are a very good team, and not just because they've beaten Kansas. They have some incredible transfer depth there. They are well balanced, and they play a very speedy but also physical style of basketball. So I want to see where Kansas State will go, especially because I believe they made the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16 last year. Maybe we get another Kansas State matchup in the future. We will see. But those are the six teams in distress. Well, more like five, but with one kind of. Those are the six teams in distress. Those are the six teams sending out their SOS. But this was the hockey show. This was the hockey show. We will be covering more hockey later on in the year. Do not worry. I had a really fun time doing this, and like I said, we'll be doing some more of that. I think we're gonna shift to some more NBA content here, and after the Super Bowl this weekend, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl as well. But then we're going to be in kind of a sports lull, so I think we might mix it up and look at some different sports as we move into February, as we move into March, especially before baseball starts. But it has been really fun to be here. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank KRUI again for giving me this opportunity. And we will see you guys next Tuesday, 8 a.m. Also, I want to say there will be no show on February the 20th as I have an appointment that morning, but we will see you guys back here next week. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a safe and wonderful Tuesday, everyone.